Hey rockers, welcome back to Bloody FMS Official. Tonight I'm taking a little chance, man. I'm going to do a story about the day John Lennon died. And you know, I know a lot of you guys on this channel are into punk rock and metal and all kinds of different types of music, but I haven't done much stuff based on John Lennon. Matter of fact, I've done no videos on John Lennon. And tonight, that's going to change because it was a significant moment in my life. And I know many people out there are into the Beatles. Let's face it, man, there's two types of people, the Stones people and the Beatles people. I am both, proudly. Yeah, I love the Stones, I love the Beatles, I love the Seeds. Sky Saxon, shout out to the Sky Saxon fans. You know, the other day somebody called me a hippie, and I kind of got to stop there and interject. First of all, I don't label myself anything, but if I do kind of float towards one genre or another, that would be punk rock. But that being said, before there was punk rockers, there was guys like John Lennon. Matter of fact, he was one of the original rebels in rock and roll as far as the 60s go. And we all know the story of the Beatles, so I'm not here to regurgitate any Beatles stuff. We all know that can be looked up, and most of you that are watching are going to correct me, and I'm not going to even attempt to get my Beatles timeline down, but I'm going to tell you this, man. The day John Lennon was shot, it was a significant event, unlike any other. I don't recall John F. Kennedy being shot, but I remember when Elvis was taken out. When Elvis Presley was gone, it affected the whole country, and it was just Elvis everywhere, right? The same thing when John Lennon left. It was like just complete shock. I mean, the guy had been in retirement for 5 years, right? So this guy calls me a hippie the other day, and I tell him, you know, not really, man, because what you don't know is the beginning of my story, which starts with listening to music from the 50s and 60s. And when I was a little kid, there was no punk rockers to look up to or hard rock or metal people that I was really into as much as I was into John Lennon and the Beatles. But John Lennon in particular was a hero of mine, and I was reading a book about John Lennon the week that he died. And there was a part in there about Jimi Hendrix passing, and John Lennon was mourning him, and he had this massive epiphany that he was selfish for mourning the death of Hendrix because he was just thinking about his own feelings, but that death was actually a very selfish thing, and it was pretty profound. Flash forward about another week, and I was on the phone with my good friend Patty King, and when that moment happened, I'm going to get to that. But first, I want to say, do you realize all the cool songs John Lennon has put out in his career? Just amazing songs. I made a list, man. Imagine, Working Class Hero, Isolation, Instant Karma, Jealous Guy, Cold Turkey, Gimme Some Truth, Watching the Wheels, Mind Games, The Ballad of John and Yoko, I'm Losing You, Happy Christmas, War is Over, Beautiful Boy, and of course, Give Peace a Chance. That's just some of the songs John wrote, and that's just his solo material. That's not even counting like I Am the Walrus and all the good Beatles stuff that he wrote, man. I'm a huge fan of John Lennon, and he was one of my heroes before I had other, like, radical rock heroes. He was the guy, man. He was the guy that was, rumored to be funding the IRA, which Yoko Ono later said that wasn't true. He was rumored to be funding the Yippies. He had donated money. Was actually friends with Bobby Seale and the Black Panther Party. I mean, let's face it, John Lennon was being followed and surveilled by Nixon and the Nixon administration and the FBI. Come on, he was a rock and roller, but they knew this guy had a voice for change and a voice that was a plateau for the people to get the word out there about social causes. And John Lennon was way at the forefront of that stuff. And for that, that's why I'm here today doing the story about John Lennon. And I tell you, man, Double Fantasy, his album that came out after 5 years of pretty much seclusion so he could raise his son Sean, Double Fantasy, absolutely adore that album. He had risen to new levels of songwriting as far as that album goes. And as far as the commercial aspect, he had so many hits on that album, man. It was fantastic, and I can't say enough good things about Double Fantasy. What a fantastic album, released just a few weeks before John was gone. November 1980, it was his 5th studio album, him and Yoko Ono, I should say, together on that album. Fantastic artwork, just a great album in particular. And then, of course, Mark David Chapman had to come up and ruin everything. We were all wondering, man, John's new album is so good. And I bought it like the very couple days after it was released, or my mother bought it for me, I should say. Thank you to my dearly departed mother. Rest in peace. But yeah, she bought that album and I just couldn't take it off the turntable. We were just hooked on it. Big time. Like hooked on phonics, but not. Yeah, John, you know, he was known for his like protests in bed and all kinds of stuff. And the controversial stuff he would say, like about the Beatles being more popular than you know who. And man, I just always loved him. And then, of course, there's David Peele. David Peele. When I met the scum rocker G.G. Allen, he was a huge fan of David Peele, and he was like, David Peele, you know, he played with John Lennon, and I, you know, since then, of course, I've done all my research, and I'm a big fan of David Peele in the Lower East Side, and David Peele, man, not only did he perform with John and Yoko many times, for instance, at the John Sinclair Freedom Rally, the famous 1972 Madison Square Garden concert, and John Lennon not only produced, but him and Yoko contributed vocals to the album called The Pope Smokes Dope by David Peele and the Lower East Side, 1972. John even signed him to Apple Records. Yep. So that's pretty cool stuff there, man. I'm a big fan of David Peele. And did you guys know, did any of you punk rockers know that the day before John Lennon died, Darby Crash unalived himself? God, I hate that term. Of the Germs. The singer of the Germs took himself out the day before John Lennon was gone, and the press just completely overshadowed the fact that that happened. I know that Darby was not anywhere as famous as John Lennon, but if John hadn't gone out that next day, sadly, Darby Crash probably would have gotten a lot more press because it was an intentional thing he did in order to get press. And, well, Darby Crash, that's a whole nother story. I love him as well. Did you know that G.G. Allen actually, back to that guy, because I did a story on him recently, so I'm bringing him up. He was apparently, according to his brother Merle, watched the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show and was influenced by the Beatles, and that's when Merle and Gigi decided that's what they wanted to do, rock and roll. So that says a lot, man, about who John Lennon reached. All kinds of people like John Lennon, man. It was a very sad day, December the 8th, 1980. I'm sitting there listening to Rock 106 radio, talking on the phone to my good friend Patty King, who I went to high school with, and we were talking for hours on the phone, which we normally did, good friend of mine, and the newscaster, the broadcaster came on the radio and broke in, right? And he says, John Lennon has been shot. It was awful. We were like, what? We had no idea that 20 minutes later, the news broadcaster was going to cut in again and give us the horrific news that John was gone. It was really stunning. And I remember we were like just shocked. Just really shocked. And I remember, you know, of course, being upset later after I got off the phone, you know, and wow, it was really shocking. The whole nation mourned John Lennon. The whole world mourned John Lennon. The whole globe mourned John Lennon. It was very shocking. Even the ex-Beatles who had rough and rocky relationships with John on and off and stuff like that. I know him and Paul were going back and forth. There was even rumors of a possible Beatles reunion on Saturday Night Live. That's a crazy, infamous story. But I know when he was gone, those guys were all, their hearts were broken, you know. And to this day, I've, you know, kind of read my history on the Beatles and John. And I think he was actually getting along with George and Ringo. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. But I do know that their hearts were broken when John was gone. Man, we were absolutely shocked. And it was just a bummer because there was going to be no concerts. There was going to be no more fanfare over the new album. It was just, wow. I played that record until it wore out, man. You know, and then what happened was December 14th, about a week later, Yoko Ono announced that she was going to have a 10-minute commemorative vigil of silence that was going to happen globally in honor of her late husband and for all the fans to give them a little bit of closure. And since they had basically no funeral for John, this was a chance for all the fans to have a 10-minute silent vigil. And some radio stations even stopped broadcasting for that 10 minutes, like off the air for 10 minutes, which is kind of unheard of in radio. But man, I was there, man. It was a Sunday, December the 14th, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 1 p.m. where I was at in Peoria, Illinois at the time. And I remember I rolled up a big doobie with strawberry rolling papers in honor of, you know, Strawberry Fields Forever. to remember John. I probably rolled up more than one, but I know there was at least one. And this was about the time that I put a lock on my door and my parents were banging on the door because I was smoking weed in the house and they could smell it. And I was like, no, it's John Lennon's memorial. I'm smoking weed and I'm celebrating. That's a true story. That was kind of when I got my independence, and a few months later I went off the crazy train rails. That's another story though. But I'm telling you, man, when John Lennon was gone, it was shocking. It was one of those things that no one really ever healed from. I know that sounds cheesy, but all you fans that are hardcore fans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And to this day, when I look up Beatles stuff on YouTube, it's just millions and millions of views. So I hope you guys, will leave a comment and tell me below, where were you the day that John Lennon left us? How did you hear about it? How did it affect you? Tell me in the comments below. Please subscribe to my channel and help an old rocker out. And maybe like the video if you like it at all. I appreciate it. I just wanted to kind of go down memory lane and talk about the late, great John Lennon. Was he the walrus? I don't know. But, I'm always going to be a Beatles fan. Always going to be a John Lennon fan. Proudly, rest in peace to the late, great John Lennon. And to all of his fans out there, rock and roll. Talk to you soon. Stay real.